Welcome to Manhwa Vault. The scene opens on a grotesque landscape. Twisted trees stretch upward like the crooked fingers of ancient women. The ground is soaked in pitch-black mud, where moss clings thickly to the rotting soil. Above it all hangs a murky, suffocating sky. It is a place crawling with bizarre monsters that should not exist in any normal reality. One of them is already on top of him. The creature's drool drips onto his face as it lowers its jagged mouth to bite. Its teeth gnash just inches from his throat. Blood splatters across the mud. He realizes with bitter familiarity that if he dies here, he will simply wake up from the dream. For 12 years now, he has endured this. 12 years of pain so vivid that every death feels real. Morning light slices through the blinds. A normal city, a normal room. Reality returns, quiet and mundane. He reflects that the pain of dying is something he can endure. What truly exhausts him is sleep itself. He feels unbearably tired, yet the moment he falls asleep, he is dragged back to that nightmare world. If he dies in a nightmare, he wakes up here. If he sleeps here, he returns there. A proper night's rest has been impossible for 12 long years. Determined to stop dying so easily in that hellish place, he has spent every waking moment preparing. Weapon training, martial arts, swordsmanship, jungle survival, military tactics. For 12 years, he has practiced everything he could think of. Because of that effort, his deaths in the nightmare have gradually become less frequent. Yet the real problem has never changed. Sleep. Someone once advised him to try finding something he truly wanted to do, believing that might help him sleep peacefully. He had thought about it carefully, but the only thing he truly wanted was simply to sleep. Just once, he wishes he could fall asleep and rest peacefully. He pauses in the quiet room. A sudden tremor runs through him. Blood begins dripping from his nose. A faint sound escapes him as darkness crashes over his vision. His body collapses to the floor. Silence follows. Then awareness slowly returns. Something feels different. His body feels strangely light. The terrible, persistent headache that had haunted him for years is gone. Cool air fills his lungs as he inhales deeply. It feels as though he actually slept well. 12 years of exhaustion vanish in a single breath. A quiet realization begins forming in his mind. Perhaps he actually died. If that is true, then this place must be the nightmare world he has visited in his sleep for over 12 years now surrounds him completely. Only this time, it did not disappear after death. A faint rustling breaks the stillness. His gaze snaps sideways. Something crawls along the bark of a nearby tree. A lizard-like creature clings to the trunk, its long tongue flicking through the air. The smell reaches him first. A heavy realization settles in his chest. He might truly be dead, and if that is the case, then dying here will not send him back to reality. From this moment on, this world is his reality. His eyes sharpen with clarity. There is no hesitation left in them. He knows exactly what kind of place this is, and he knows exactly what must be done to survive. Given the situation, he shouldn't fight right now. First, he needs to head to a bright place that monsters hate. He smiles, though, and grabs onto his blade, saying that he has this feeling that he doesn't want to run away anymore. As he appears behind the monster, it turns, and he says maybe it's because he slept deeply for the first time in ages, or because the body is younger than his real one. The monster begins charging at him and snarls as it leaps towards him. He tightens the grip on his blade, saying his whole body is screaming at him to fight and survive. As he swings, he cleaves through its tongue and upper torso, splitting this thing in half. And when he looks back, he makes sure that it's dead as it falls onto the floor. Tiny rays of light begin shining through the sky as he's butchering the monster. He reaches deep inside, finding a blue core, and he holds it in his hand as he raises it to his mouth. He starts chewing on that thing, and then looks up at the sky, saying that in this dark fantasy world, he will survive no matter what. And first, his goal is to head to what he said before a brighter place that the monsters hate. Sometime later, we see him in a tree, actually sleeping. When he slowly opens his eyes, he smiles and says that it was another perfect night of sleep, and it's been a month since he crossed over here. He continued heading from the pitch-black darkness toward the light. And just because he feels like fighting now doesn't mean he goes hunting, because risking his life for fun is madness. But he supposes he can't help but feel the urge to fight. and the only times he hunts is when he needs food. As he starts to get hungry, he quickly dashes behind this bat-legged creature, cutting its head off, and digs into its body, finding its core, saying that he also does this to obtain a new power. And the essence inside the monster's body gives him a chance to gain the monster's power. Ever since he started eating these, adapting to this place has become much easier. And one more fact he discovered is that the body seems to belong to someone with the status of a third-class mercenary. But he also finds it strange that he can even read the writing here. As he's looking at the badge, he says that the existence of a token like this means there are people living somewhere in this world, and he's much closer to the area the monsters hate than ever before. He then looks down, spotting a trap, and is surprised. He says that means that somebody is close and starts to run straight towards the light and find a house, and he can't believe it. He knocks on the door and enters, asking if anybody is home. While it is empty, he spots a book on the table, and when he looks at it, is called the Demon Realm Chronicles. He reads it and says that it's about the history of this place, and the terms used are recorded very meticulously and for him to survive in this world. This book is absolutely necessary. A man then enters the house behind him, pointing a crossbow directly at him, asking who he is, and he says that he needs to answer him clearly or he'll put a hole in his head. The man says that he's so glad to see someone else, but maybe he's mistaking him for a robber. He tells him not to misunderstand. There was just a house in this remote area, so he came in out of curiosity. The old man tells him to get lost, then, as he has no business with him. He says he understands, and then asks about the book, asking if he can lend it to him since he wants to read it, saying if he needs he'll pay a price. The old man asks what he'll do if he refuses, but he needs this book to survive, and he grabs his blade, saying in that case, then he might just become a robber. The old man continues, pointing his crossbow at him, and says he doesn't know how strong he is, but he doesn't feel like he'll lose. The old man laughs, telling him that a robber wouldn't talk about wanting to read a book, and says it's nice to meet him. And we learn the old man's name is Hector. We finally learn our protagonist's name is actually Kim Woojin. Hector says that his name is peculiar, and he butchers that, and Woojin tells him just to call him Jin instead. And he says his name must be hard to pronounce. Hector says he understands what he's saying, but that book is precious to him, so he can't lend it out. He wants to read it, and he needs to stay here while he does, and in return he would like him to help with simple chores. Jin thanks him. Sometime later, we see Hector made a pot of food, and Jin explains he ended up staying here with Hector. He was gruff, but he didn't seem like a bad person, but Jin can't believe he's about to eat some warm soup for the first time in so long. He takes a bite and starts crying, saying that Hector might just be an angel. One morning, Hector went out and hunted, and Jin asks if he has to go out every day, and Hector says that he does, and today might take a while. Apparently, it's to take revenge on the monster that killed his comrades, and Jin says that Hector looks quite strong. So seeing him nervous means it must be a considerably powerful monster, and when he was alone, he would read the chronicles. All the stories begin with the Northern Empire. The king of the Northern Empire, blinded by greed, laid his hands on the otherworldly gate, which was said to hold the truth of all creation and immense power. And on that day, the calamity began. Monsters began flooding out from that gate and turned the North into a demonic realm in just 9 years. In response, humanity united many factions to form the Order Alliance. And the Order Alliance built a barrier to stop the spread of the demonic realm. He closes his book and says, as expected, there's a lot of useful info. But they say, the deeper you go into the demonic realm, the stronger the monsters are, and that the monsters got weaker as he headed closer towards the light. As Hector is hauling Cheeks back to the house, Jin wonders just how deep inside the demonic realm he was wandering to begin with. As Hector turns around, we see a pack of wolf-type monsters chasing him, but one in particular is built crazy style. But Jin is just wondering how strong he is in this place. As the wolves get closer, Hector turns and fires 3 shots rapidly towards them. Of course, not a single one lands as the wolf-bear dog thing deflect the arrows. He realizes he's in a bad spot, and he turns seeing Jin walk out of the house, carrying his blade towards him. Hector tells him to run as it's dangerous here, but Jin runs straight past him instead. Hector turns surprised, but of course, Jin is wanting to do some limit testing. He leaps up off the ground, flying right over one of the wolves, and it stretches its hand out to attack him. But Jin cleaves straight down through it. But he doesn't stop there as he goes all the way through, cleaving the monster completely in half as it falls to the floor. We see is the leader snarling at him. And even Hector is in disbelief, saying that he can't believe he took down a werewolf in a single slash. Jin just wants to know if this monster is considered strong or not. Hector says that if he really wants to know if it is strong, he'll tell him, and that it is incredibly so. Jin says he sees and tells him that he'll hear the details after he deals with the rest of them. They continue snarling. He says they don't look that strong though, but there are about 40 of them, just enough to screw him over if he's careless. Instead of fighting them all, he'll go kill the one that looks like it's in command and shatter their morale. As he takes a second look at it, he says that its build is exceptionally large. So, that has to be the leader of the group, but also the first one that he needs to take down. As it stares directly at him, Jin stares back until the leader looks down at the floor and then off to the side and turns its head and begins hauling cheeks, leaving the other wolves confused, and it starts barking at them. They just keep staring and follow, just wondering what's going on. Hector asks why they would run away when those wolves are known for their bravery. Jin says that it's intelligent since it can assess a situation, and he finds that pretty interesting as the leader is still running away. Sometime later, they manage to get the werewolf cleaned, and Hector says that it's at least 40 gold coins. That's the bounty of the head of the werewolf he killed. Jin asks if that's a lot of money, and Hector says that it is. It's enough to live comfortably without working for 6 to 7 years. Jin says that for it to have such a high bounty on a weakling like this is crazy. But if a trash monster like a werewolf has such a high bounty, he smiles, saying that when he's short on cash, he just needs to find and kill other monsters, and he will rake in a huge amount of money. Perhaps life here might be easier than the last 12 he spent in reality. Hector then brings out a bag of coins, some food, and a map. Jin asks what he's doing with all of this, and as Hector is putting it all into another bag, he says that he should go to Pioneer Village and find the dude that he has marked on the map named Jacob, as he will buy that hide for a fair price. Jin asks if it's okay to give him something this valuable, and Hector reminds him that he killed the werewolf, so he's simply just paying the price, and he already told him that he had a grudge against it. He stretches his hand out, thanking him for getting revenge for him, and says that he hopes that they meet again if the opportunity arises. But they shake hands, and Jin thanks him for everything so far. As it's now time to head out, he nods farewell to Hector and goes off into the forest. And we see the wolf monster from before watching him from a cliff, debating if it should get revenge or not. Jin eventually makes his way to Pioneer Village and says that it's actually not as bad as he expected, and it's pretty well stocked for a small town. As he's walking through the village, he keeps getting mugged by a bunch of people. And he says it must be because he's a stranger they've never seen before, as everyone is on high alert. But it's only understandable, as in a world like this, the thing more dangerous than monsters can be people. He makes his way to an inn which is full of customers, and it looks pretty lively. He makes his way over to the barkeep, and the dude asks if he wants a drink, but Jin says he'll pass, and he wants to know if he can find a man named Jacob. The dude beside him looks over, saying that he is Jacob, asking what he could do for him. Jin says the man has the face of a scammer, and says that he was sent by Hector and was told if he met him, he could sell a werewolf hide. Jacob stands up, dropping his knife, asking if Hector really killed a werewolf. Jin doesn't think there's a reason to correct him, and when Jacob looks at it, he says that this is an actual werewolf hide, and he's in disbelief. Everybody's talking about how the old man Hector actually did it, and Jacob laughs, saying as expected he knew Hector could pull it off. The dude started to surround Jin, and he asks what they're all doing. Jacob says surely he can tell by looking and to get lost while he's asking nicely, and he'll spare his life. Jin says that the scammer faces never lie after all, and he says Hector sent him here after trusting him, and he wonders if he's always been doing business with this intent. Jacob says that he simply made an investment. Hector was located too far away, so supplying him caused a loss, and he needs to make up for that since he's lost so much thus far. Jin debates killing him, but says he shouldn't because he's too pissed off, and he can't kill a person over a mere hide. But Jacob should be glad he's a nice guy until Jacob throws his beer on his face. He tells him to stop trying to be so clever and get lost. Jin thinks about it for a second and stands up and starts to walk away towards the door. Jacob laughs, saying, "That's a smart choice." As he reaches for the bag, he then hears things being thrown across the room, and he sees him blocking off the door with the furniture. Jin tells Jacob that if he intended to scam someone from the start, he should have gone for the neck instead of the back. Jacob laughs, saying he takes back what he said about him being smart, and tells his men that this kid clearly doesn't value his life. As they run at him, Jin thinks about it and says that guys like them won't give him any guilt, even if he does kill them. He knocks the first dude's sword backwards, and the dude realizes he's strong. But it's not just that, but he's also way faster than him as he quickly dashes through the dude, cutting him twice across the chest. A fat ass raises his axe into the air and swings down, but Jin backs up the attack, grabbing onto a nearby table, and flips it at him. Then Jin raises his sword before cleaving straight down through the table and cuts his lard ass in half. He stares at Jacob, and Jacob starts to drop a log on his pants, wondering where a monster like that came from, and says, "A fighter this strong in this area, there is no way he wouldn't know him, but whatever. At this rate, he's going to die for nothing." As Jin's still fighting, he cuts yet another dude in half and dodges the follow-up attack by his homeboy before he returns by punching him in the chest. He raises his sword before also cutting him in half too, as Jin stares down at the man's corpse. He glares at Jacob, and Jacob yells, telling everybody to run since they've already lost. They start to jump out of the window and make a break for it. As Jacob's the first to go through the door, he's hit by a log. As Jacob starts to stand back up, what he spots is a red wolf staring at him. He asks why the hell it's in the village. Jin also hops out of the window as Jacob and his men are now trapped between Jin and the wolf. Jin wonders what the hell it's doing here since it was scared last time, and he talks to it. The wolf stares at him and asks if it really came here just to die. It gets scared and rolls over on its stomach and starts wagging its tail, acting like a normal dog would. Jacob and his men are just speechless, and even Jin is confused, wondering what the hell is wrong with it. Jin starts to get an idea, because this thing is low-key domesticated and points at Jacob, telling the wolf to go ahead and bite them. It instantly gets back up on its legs and leaps straight at them and starts devouring them. Jin says that it's actually pretty nice and it might be useful. Jacob watches as the wolf rips apart his two men and wonders what he does now, and says he needs to get out of this quickly. He thinks that Jin's probably is stupid and he'll probably let it slide if he apologizes a few times. He gets on his hands and knees and starts bowing, begging for him to be spared. Jacob says revenge will only come after this. Jin stabs the blade right in front of his head and actually cuts his skull open a little bit, and Jacob looks up in fear. Jin is pissed that he's taking him for a pushover. He recalls when he was talking to a manager, and they begged him to let it slide as his salary hadn't come in, and that's what the factory manager told him. Back then, he was soft-hearted, and he had no choice but to accept the situation. However, he shouldn't have done that, because once he knelt down, the salary that was a week late got delayed by a month, then 2, and at some point he went to ask the manager about his salary, and the manager got pissed, saying that they should stick together when things are rough, and he treated him as selfish and a pushover, and it felt absolutely shitty living month to month. He did learn one lesson back then, though, as Jacob smiles, thinking that he's actually letting him go, and that this is his chance of revenge. He grabs his dagger, leaping at him. Jin turns, grabbing his wrist, saying that it's guys like him who scam that don't know the meaning of remorse. Jacob realizes he is damned before his head gets sent flying into the air, as Jacob's watching the world spin around. Jin says this time he'll never be taken for a pushover again, and now the only thing that left is the red wolf. He doesn't know what to do with it, but it seems that it decided to follow him for now as it drops a sack of coins in front of him. Jin looks down, asking if it's trying to tag along with him. The wolf then headbutts his chest and lets Jin pet it. He sighs a little bit out of relief, calling it clever. He says that for now, and they'll get along pretty well. The next morning comes as we see him waking up in the inn. The wolf is in there too. He smiles, saying that it was a perfect deep sleep. It was a morning so refreshing that he felt like he could fly. As he and the wolf stretch, he then heads out and washes his clothes. He's a little tired and says that he killed a person for the first time, but it wasn't just one or two, but many. However, he doesn't feel any guilt at all. He says maybe it's because they were scum, but rather maybe not, because the emotion he felt back then was the same thing as hunting monsters, and it was a thrill. There's definitely something inside of him that is starting to change in this world. And he wonders if maybe he's cursed or something, but says that he survived, so that's a good thing in the end. And one thing is certain is that his life here is going to be vastly different from his original life, and he will enjoy the present for what it is. He then makes his way to Pinwar Village 5 and says he needs to sell the pelt, but also tells the wolf to stay nearby out of sight, and says according to the chronicles, to receive a monster bounty, you need to head to the Order Alliance. And then he also debates calling the wolf a name, since calling it a mud over and over doesn't seem right. He heads to a fancy building as we see a dude stretching inside. He asks if this is the Order Alliance. The dude says it is, wondering what he's here for. And Jin drops the werewolf hide onto the counter, saying that he's here to collect a monster bounty. The dude says this is just dog skin and it's not a place to pull pranks off. But when he opens it, he starts freaking out, saying that this is a werewolf pelt, but also wants to know if he caught this himself. He says he did. The dude takes him inside, giving him a place to sit down. Someone else enters apologizing for the wait, saying that given the amount involved, they had to make sure the pelt was real, so it took some time, but it is authentic, and then gives him the reward. Jin says that this is the money that Hector was talking about to live comfortably for quite a few years, but it didn't feel real until he saw it in person, and he had a trembling, which was different from when he hunts. Money is definitely a good thing, though, and he's glad to have so much right now. The dude then says he has a question, wondering if he would be interested in taking another request, as he has a favor to ask. Jin wonders what it is, and the man says that a monster recently appeared at the nearby quarry, and it's causing quite a headache. But the quarry is dangerous because of the music monsters, so the workers can't go in, and since they can't mine the bloodstone, money is not circulating in the city, and the entire city is on the brink of ruin, and that it's apparently stronger than a werewolf. But he feels like he could probably handle it, and the man tells him that it's called the Mad Skull. It's a monster with a bounty of 70 gold coins. Jin says he actually read about this in the chronicles. Also, it's one which he's already faced. As we see, it's an absolute giant. He explains that it had a very hard skull and was super aggressive. It had toughness and strength incomparable to a werewolf, but it's no wonder they're struggling. It took him a month to kill it the first time since he died 28 times. The dude asks if he thinks he can do it or not, and Jin waits a second before saying, of course, and with this, his next prey has been decided. He then heads to the quarry and says that he heard they couldn't work for a while because of the monster, but the gloom look of the mine created a pretty chilling atmosphere for him. It's definitely not a place he wants to stay in for long, and it would be best just for him to finish this as quickly as possible. As he starts to head inside, some men spot him from a tent and tell him to wait a moment. He reaches for his blade instinctively, and they tell him to wait his turn as they arrived here first and were just preparing for battle. He asks if they're really trying to get him to leave because they came first, and he asks why there's a queue for hunting monsters. The guy realizes that he's low-key right and tells him that he could also join their team and they can hunt together. Jin says now he's trying to recruit him, but if he waits for them to finish and they somehow do succeed, it'll just be a waste of his time. But still, he doesn't need to fight them. If it's just about the order, even though he would have to share the loot with this group, it might be better to work together. However, because of Jacob, he knows that he can't just trust people so easily here. He says they seem to have plenty of people, so why do they want to bring him along? The dude tells him that it's embarrassing to admit, but he prioritizes safety over performance, and he thinks it'd be a big help if he joined him because he's strong. Jin's surprised he's suddenly speaking so formally, because it's expected these guys are fundamentally weak against the strong. He asks why he thinks he is strong, and the dude says that the wolf wouldn't be following him if he wasn't. Jin turns spotting it with a woman petting it, and she says that wolf monsters are known for their strong independence. Even the Order Alliance hasn't been able to tame them. It's amazing to see one following a human so well. Jin says that he told it to stay put. So what did he pop out? He then sees it eating, saying that he can't believe it only came out because they offered it meat. But he hasn't even got the chance to eat this meat cuisine either. The wolf looks guilty and won't even make eye contact with them, but it bites out a chunk, dropping the meat on the floor, and kicks it over to Jin. Jin asks what the hell that dog takes him for and looks down at the meat, and it's glowing, and he starts to sweat. wondering why the hell his body is doing this. He says that he doesn't know the last time he had a real meat dish, but a dog was eating this, and it was also on the ground. He goes to grab it, realizing his human dignity is going down the drain, but the woman tells him that if he's hungry, she can give him some. He realizes that he misjudged these people, and this woman is actually a goddess in the human flesh. He decides to join their group and heads down into the mines with them. He says that the meat was really gas, and it reminds him of some Sichuan cuisine. It's a taste that can't even be compared to the monster meat he ate to survive when he first got here. The woman says that now that she thinks about it, they haven't introduced themselves yet. The guy with the bandana introduces himself as Jonathan, captain of the Black Marlin mercenary group. The woman's name is Claire. Jin goes to say his name, but just gives them the short version instead. Jonathan says it's nice to meet him, and if he has any questions to feel free to ask anytime. Jin says he understands, and then Jonathan looks ahead saying that this is where they will fight the Mad Skull. He tells the trap team to set up the nets, and he orders the spear team to move, as well asking Claire if she's ready to get started. She says she is, and Jin is surprised as what he's witnessing is magic, as he hasn't got to see it yet in this world, though it was mentioned in the Chronicles. Claire starts to cast her magic by chanting, and she casts a spell on Jonathan called Feather Step. Jonathan says that her buffs are excellent, as always, and she tells him that he is about 3 minutes at worst and 5 minutes at best. Jonathan tells everybody to stay ready while he lures the Mad Skull here as he dashes off. Jin says he seems sluggish at first, but he's now become faster, and that magic is actually pretty cool. He wonders if he could use it too if he learned. The spear group leader says there's no time to waste, as the monster will be here soon. If even one person makes a mistake, they could all die. He tells them to stay sharp. They also gave Jin his spear, and he says that driving the monster into a trap and pouring firepower into it is not a bad plan. But he doesn't know if it's actually going to work against the monster. As Jonathan is making his way back, he yells, telling the trap team to get ready. As he jumps over the nets, they start pulling their strings. As the Mad Skull runs straight into it, they begin pulling, stopping its momentum. He then orders the spears, and they all raise them up before throwing them into the side of the monster, causing it to scream. The trap team is struggling to keep it held to the point that the Mad Skull starts to move around and throws them into the air. Jin realizes that it's not good since they're being overpowered. Some of the trap team start to stabilize, saying that there's so many of them, yet they still couldn't tie down one monster. But now it's too late because that little moment gave it a chance to break through the net. It then starts to glare at them before dashing straight past all of them, heading towards Claire. And she goes to cast another spell in a panic. But Jin steps up and meets its charge directly as it pushes him backwards a little bit on the ground. We see he stopped it by grabbing onto its tusk. Claire tells him that it's dangerous, but he tells her not to worry because he knows how to take down a Mad Skull already. He keeps trying to push him forward, but he throws it to the side and then quickly dashes underneath it, pulling out his blade and raises it up, knocking its head into the air. He says he thought he had gotten stronger, but this thing has incredible raw power. Starts to scream and thrust at his head, and he realizes that he actually let his guard down, but he feels Claire's buff magic and uses it, dodging backwards out of the attack. She says that she'll help him too. Jin says his body feel much lighter, just like if he put down a 30-kilo pack that he was carrying all day. With this, he should be able to hunt it much more easily using that method. Jonathan tells Jin that they will help, but Jin tells them to stay back. Jonathan does, and Jin says that for now, it's easier for him to do this alone. To hunt a Mad Skull, you only need a few things. Even if it's called a Mad Skull, it's ultimately just a pig, and it runs fast in a straight line, but turning is difficult for it as it keeps bumping into every single wall. He says first he'll use that to stop it in its tracks, but the next time it bounces into the wall, he jumps into the air, making it charge after him once more. But that's what he wanted because as it starts to burst into the side of the quarry wall, causing it to trip, falling onto the ground, he wonders if this is the power of the buff. And it looks like it's even struggling to chase him. And it's time for the second step. The tusks, which are as long swords, serve the same purpose as hands for a human. But those hard tusks cannot be cut with a sword. And in that case, he'll aim for the weak point, which is its nose. As he swipes downwards, cutting horizontally across its face, he says that the pain intensifies with every moment, and it'll become too burdensome to attack any further. He tightens the grip on his blade before charging back in, this time cutting on both of its hind legs and just starts attacking all over. He says that he's going to make sure it doesn't get another chance to attack. He starts smiling as Jonathan and the rest finally catch up. They see outside the quarry, one of the mining machines is toppled over, and they decide that they need to find Jin first. But Claire and them watch as the wolf runs straight past their face and starts to growl at them. They get a little scared until it starts yawning, and she realizes that it's telling them not to interfere. Jonathan makes his way back, asking what happened to the mad skull. Of course, Jin is over here eating its core and says that there isn't one anymore. All that's left for them now is some pork they could eat. Jonathan asks if he really did it alone, saying that it's amazing as he's never heard of anyone taking one down solo. The wolf starts to sniff into the air and growls, as from the mine, more mad skulls start to appear. Jonathan tells everyone to get ready for another battle, but Claire says to wait, as we see that it's actually a mother with piglets, and they just look like sad babies. The mother also looks at them, wondering if she can just leave, and Jin and the wolf don't even bother chasing. She understands that they're letting her go, and she waddles her little piggies away, and Claire and them are surprised that she's just leaving. Claire says it must have been planning to raise its young here, and Jonathan says he feels a little bad, but he's glad it left peacefully. That night at the city at the end, Jonathan's talking about how nobody got injured at all tonight, and he's super happy that they actually caught the mad skull. But the highlight of the hunt is the money, as now it's time for them to split the rewards. Everybody starts to howl, and Claire says that the reward was meant to be 70 gold coins, but this is way more than that. Jonathan says that this is because he made a fuss since it wasn't just one mad skull, and there were even piglets. The job was more dangerous than the info they provided, and he demanded a bigger reward, and they gave them a whole 110 coins. Jin says that they didn't even fight the other monster, yet they still give him that much money. He says that he actually told them a little white lie. The men start laughing, saying that's their captain, and if he doesn't get caught, it becomes the truth. Jin sigh, but calls them interesting, and Jonathan walks over, saying that he's thinking of giving half of the earnings to Jin, and he wants to know if anybody has any problems with that. Jin asks if he really means half of it, and Jonathan says that if it wasn't for him, they would have died a dog's death, so he should just accept it happily. Since the base reward went up, it's still enough for them split, and it's what they all want anyways. They start giving him the thumbs up, and Jin says with the buff and the trap, they were actually a big help, but it seems like not everybody here is bad. He picks up a beer glass and tells them all that he'll pay for all the drinks for night. They say they're going to make him spend everything he earned. As they start chugging down legit barrels, Jin watches as Claire walks away, asking where she's going. She says she's going to go practice some magic, and he realizes this is a chance for him to learn. He follows her outside as she is meditating on a cliff top. Jin says she must be tired, and training her on after a hunt is impressive, but he does debate if he's actually going to be able to learn magic from her or not. Sometime later, we see them loading supplies, and Claire asks if he really wants to learn magic, and she says that she can teach him. He's just surprised she agreed more easily than he expected, and she says she's been wanting to give him some kind of gift anyways. When the mad skull charged at her, unlike a certain someone, he actually stepped in and saved her, and she'd be more than happy to teach him something like magic. And if it were a mercenary that doesn't even follow the basics of combat, like protecting their mage, she'd say no. But she knows that he's different. Jonathan tells her to stop acting that way, as magic isn't something that he can learn overnight anyways, and they still have to leave the village within 2 days. She says that Jin can just come with them, and Jonathan asks why a powerful beast hunter like Jin would tag, along with some mercenaries. Then makes some cringe joke about how a brave wolf is more comfortable alone. But Jin has literally nothing to do in this world at this point, and Jonathan's making him feel like he has to act dignified for no reason. And he says that he might try lying a bit, asking Jonathan where his next destination is. Jonathan says it's the 4th Pioneer City, as he heard there was a big job waiting there. Jin says that he was actually planning on going that way himself, wondering if he could tag along since it means he could learn some magic on the side. Claire and Jonathan low-key just ran his because it was a lie and they knew that he'd fall for it since he's bad at lying. Jonathan says that this is a perfect coincidence, and Claire does as well, saying that they're glad they have a reliable ally joining them. Jin says that his next destination has been decided now, and we see the group walking with a giant monster that looks like a turtle carrying supplies. It even has a tent on its back. It's called a Tarask, and it's selectively bred for transportation, and it's one of the few magic beasts successfully domesticated by humanity. He says that he saw this in the Chronicles, and it seems that they use them as porters instead of horses, and this thing is house-sized. Jonathan tells them that they've got to get a move on since they have a long way to go. In the night, he's practicing his meditation with Claire, and he says learning something new is a difficult task, and there are dozens of reasons why learning is hard. But the hardest part of all is the effort of repetition. In any field, there are certain aspects where growth is only possible through constant repetition. However, progress in that area is slow and it often plateaus. Repeating the same thing over and over during a plateau is a pretty agonizing experience. But this is a pain he is well acquainted with, as the 12 years of agony he endured to survive. The dreams only served to make him stronger. He just persisted until he succeeded, just like now, as we see a little bit of mana flying around him. He says that he's already well acquainted with this, and it worked out. Claire claps, saying that he's finally starting to feel magic, and he asks if that was his mana. But for him to have only felt it after 10 whole days, it means it's certainly difficult. She says to be honest, he's actually on the super slow side, but he did great. People with no talent at all go their entire lives without ever sensing Mona once. But now it's time for the second step. She pulls out a bottle and pours into this little cup as she puts on a glove, telling him to take off his clothes. He gets confused, and we see her dipping her glove into the water, and he asks what she's doing. As she's drawing something on his back, she says she's creating a path so that she can infuse mana into his body. She finishes saying that she's going to inject the magic now, so he should try to feel it carefully. He says okay as a magic circle appears from her hand. He instantly feels the mana surging through him. He starts swirling violently, and he says this is on a completely different level for what he felt before. From deep within his body, he can feel something thicker than blood flowing through him. She asks if he can feel it, and he says that he definitely can. She tells him he's just taking the first step toward using magic. There are 3 stages to the basics of magic. First is sensing mana. Second is containing it within your body. And third is utilizing it. Since he succeeded in the first step, it's time to move on to the second. She's going to control the mana and direct it towards his heart. She tells him to create a vessel to hold the magic, almost as if he's holding his breath. He focuses on actually storing it in his body. She tells him that she's going to start giving him more now. As the amount of mana grows by the second, she sees the image of a praying mantis ripping apart bugs, consuming them. The entire time, it's laughing and it wipes down its mouth and starts to gaze directly at her. She feels a sharp pain in her head, wondering what this ominous energy is, but it's not just that. As all of her mana is starting to get absorbed into him, as if it's flying into a bottomless hole, she begins to realize that at this rate, all of her mana will be drained, and the red wolf appears using its tail to grab her away from him. She's just surprised, and the wolf stares at her, hoping she realizes that it just saved her. She's glad that it did. And Jin then walks over yelling out for her, asking if she's okay. She just wonders what she saw in his mental world. She explains that a manifestation of a person's power and disposition appear as a world of its own. It's all depending on the life that person has lived, since everyone's is unique. But for such an ominous presence to exist within his mental world, it's a little scary. She says that he needs to be honest with her, asking if by chance he consumed a monster. He asks what that is, and she says that it's the crystals found only inside the body of monsters. He says that he's eaten plenty of them before. She starts to freak out, asking when and exactly how many he consumed. He says that it was since he started eating them while hunting monsters, and it's been about 10 years. As for the count, it's probably tens of thousands by now. And he asks if there's some kind of problem. She says, of course there is, because if a human consumes one, they either die or turn into a monster themselves. And now he realizes what that change in his body must be from. Clara says that it's called karma, and also known as retribution. It is the name of the turbid energy found in the demonic realm, and living beings that absorb it gain bizarre abilities in their bodies, and a monster core is a nucleus formed by that karma which accumulate in the body. As we see Jonathan and Jin talk, Claire looks worried and says that it's bothering her. She recalled the dark priest. When the otherworldly gate opened and that karma swallowed the world, there were humans who followed the monsters that absorbed it and began calling them angels. Those guys ate monster cores. Some even sacrificed humans to monsters. They were called madmen, and Jin started eating them as he hunted monsters. So he's been eating them continuously for about 10 years now. He has eaten monster cores. If he were a dark priest, he wouldn't admit to eating monster cores and would never show his mental world. But Claire thought it's even stranger that he didn't know monster cores were dangerous. While Claire was in thinking, Jin tossed another core in his mouth. Claire says, why would he pick up and eat such gross things? He's truly a mysterious man. Jean saw other monsters eating monster cores and copied them. Claire says to Jean, whatever the case, he will not eat monster cores from now on. And he's just been lucky until now. He really could have died. Claire says that eating monster cores would kill him or turns him into a monster, but there's a perfectly fine one here. Isn't that information wrong? If it's correct, then is the fact that he felt nothing after killing people, and the fact he keep wanting to fight because of the monster cores? Jean says he will try, and Claire shouts saying, try my ass. You'll absolutely stop. Never again. And says if he keep eating monster cores, it's not just his life at risk, but also he won't be able to use magic too. Jin turned back and asked if he really won't be able to use magic. Claire says, is that more important than your life? She swears that in his current state, it will be difficult to use mana manifestation. But she says not to worry too much as he should still be able to use mana arts. Jean questioned mana art. Scene shift to 4th Pioneer City, and we see a large crowd that appears to be a town square. Jean is amazed that there are so many mercenaries gathered there, and Claire says it's too early to be surprised. The scale of this request is one thing, but it's also being overseen by a holy knight. Then we see a tall, white-haired holy knight, Raymond. Jin looked back and says he's got an intense aura that can't be compared to mercenaries and can tell at a glance that he's no ordinary human. Jin asked the group, do a lot of people usually gather when a holy knight is in charge? Claire answered, that's because it's a request from the golden bug wolf. Jin asked excitedly, golden bug? Is it an insect-type monster? Claire replied, don't tell me you don't know about the golden bug. You really know nothing but hunting. Jonathan then explains the name Golden Bug is the greatest businessman, a tycoon with so many assets that he is considered one of the richest anywhere, then reveals that he died suddenly recently. Jean reacts immediately with interest and asks, was he killed? Jonathan admits, there are rumors like that, but nothing is certain. J and Y ask if the Golden Bug is dead. Why have so many people gathered here? Jonathan replied that the Golden Bug has 2 sons. And since they have inherited the Golden Bug Wolf's legacy, someone has to move the 2 sons' fortune inside the barrier. That is the request this time. Jin says moving a tycoon's fortune. No wonder such a crowd is gathered here. Next, Black Marla Mercenary Group was called for the registration, and Jonathan excitedly pushed Jin, saying that finally, it's their turn, the most important moment, and he should come with him. And introduced Jin as their mercenary group's top power. The person who caught a mad skull and tamed a werewolf. The crowd behind Jin stated that's the rumored head crusher, but he doesn't look that strong. Jean says, head crusher? What's this nonsense? Beside him, Jonathan casually telling him to put up with it for a bit and things will go well. Before Jean can dwell on it further, the scene shifts to a holy knight with a cold, commanding presence. He announces the terms, addressing the Black Marlin Mercenary Group and stating their reward of 100 gold coins, and they'll depart tomorrow as soon as the sun rises. Jin asked Jonathan that they're sparing a 100 gold coins just to move luggage. Jonathan gives a thumbs up and says that's how this field works. Half is for the labor and half for the name value. That's the way the hiring fee is set. And thanks to Jin's name value as the head crusher, they got a great rate. But Jin asked, what does it mean? Jonathan explained that it's a nickname attached to Jin, who crushed the heads of the monster he faced. Jin sigh and say whoever came up with that has a terrible naming sense. While in the back, Jonathan and his group cheer, saying 100 gold coins is like hitting the jackpot. Jin also agrees, saying it's a good thing, and this level of fame will help him in learning mana arts. That night in the town's mercenary group quarter, crowd cheer watching the fight in the arena, and a man knocked the opponent, cracking his nose. Claire walked behind Jin and asking, is he participating in the arena, and will he be okay? Jin asked Claire whether holy knights use mana arts or not, as he planned to draw their attention and learn mana arts, and says not to worry too much as he had something in mind. According to the chronicles, holy knights are beings who feel interest when they see someone strong, and if they acknowledge strength, it's said you can receive good treatment. Jin says that won't be too hard for him. This is an arena where we fight while risking each other's reputation, and he will draw that holy knight's attention in arena. Jin stand calm and dodge his opponent hit, and he punch back, landing an opponent's face, and he headbutt his opponent, knocking him down. Behind him, the announcer declared his win, and the crowd cheer, calling Head Crusher live up to his name indeed. Someone at the back says he is Head Crusher's next opponent, and Jin says he had successfully drawn attention. However, he can't be satisfied with just attention. Now, to make the Holy Knight take him seriously, he need to defeat more guys. If he defeat 2 or 3 like that, Holy Knight will wonder where a guy like him came from. But when he defeat 10s, if he's a real knight, he'll think that he would want to put his apprentice knight against him. And the Holy Knight put his apprentice Rex for a fight. And Rex was irritated as his master wants him to fight a mere mercenary, but Jin says when that moment comes, thing will really begin. He then refused because that's how the negotiations to learn mana arts begin. Apprentice Rex, Claire, Jonathan, and everyone in dormitory was shocked, and Rex shout at Jin, asking why he refused. Rex really seems angry, but the Raymond asked Jin if he was hurt anywhere. Jin replied he is fine. Raymond then asked why he was refusing the duel. Jin says Holy Knight, he is a mercenary who chased after money and power. A man like him couldn't fight a Holy Knight for free, so he proposed a bet. Holy Knight says for a bet to go through, they must both have something they want, and what could he possibly give them in return? Jin then gestured to his immense wealth, admitting he wasn't a grand enough figure to boost their reputation, but he do have a large amount of money. The crowd laughed and were outraged that a mercenary would suggest gambling with Holy Knight who lived and died by honor, and says how lightly does he take Holy Knight for. Rex was boiling with anger and says they wanted nothing to do with his money. Instead, they laid out their terms to waive all liability for any damages sustained during the fight. And that is what they want. Jin found the offer perfect and agrees happily. With no settlement to pay, he could fight to his heart's content and accept it immediately. He declared that he will tell what he want after the duel was over. Rex came down to arena and faced Jin. With a battle cry of Head Crusher, someone bet his entire fortune on Jin. Jonathan, worried, called out to Jean, telling him to signal if things became dangerous. Jean replied with calm confidence, assuring them he would win. Rex asked his mentor how far he should go. The command was to give it his all, for the opponent would certainly not be easy. Rex agrees and gathered the mana around his body ready for fight. A voice in the crowd cried out that it's in mana art, and the Holy Knight will win for sure. As the fight commenced, Rex unleashed his power at full speed, and Jin says it's definitely on a different level from those small fries. It's a refined, powerful force. And if he take a clean hit from such an attack, he could be dead. He acknowledged the mana arts and says it's interesting and take the hit directly, blocking it with his arm that push him back. Rex then asks, did you say your name was Jean? And says that Jean might be renowned in the demonic realm, but in the end, he was just a wild beast. And he'll make Jin regret looking down on a Holy Knight. An onlooker was shocked to see the Crusher being pushed back, and Jonathan says, even as an apprentice, a Holy Knight was on another level. He fall in despair, watching his money slip away. Claire also became worried, but the Holy Knight watched carefully. The fight goes on, and Jin is pushed back without any resistance. Holy Knight says he had a strange feeling because Jean had taken down other mercenaries with a single, swift strike, never dragging the fight out. Yet his movements right now was extremely passive, Could he have something up his sleeve? Rex then delivered his final mana energy blow. Then came an impossible sight. Jean deflected the Holy Knight's mana arts with his bare hands. Crowd shout dodge, as the crowd couldn't believe it. Jonathan was shocked and says, "Is that even possible to deflect mana arts bare hand?" Jean says with this, he is done measuring the opponent's combat power, wondering if he should test his durability next. Jin then punched the Rex, which made him cough. The Holy Knight Raymond noticed that Rex took a normal punch but made a face as if something was deeply wrong. It dawned on the Holy Knight that Jin hadn't been waiting for an opening all this time, but was just savoring the fight. Jean observed that he had hit the knight pretty hard, yet he was enduring it, likely thanks to his mana arts. Jin says he is curious. He wondered just how many hits the knight could take. Then, a Holy Knight commanded to stop. The fight was declared the Rex's loss. They would grant what he wanted as promised, and it was time to end it. Jean was disappointed, as he was just getting started. Still, he considered his plan a success. Cheers erupted for the head crusher, a crowd overjoyed, having believed in him all along. Elsewhere at Golden Bug's Wolf Mansion, the eldest son Derek and second son Cedric faced their own troubles. Cedric asked his brother, "Will it take 10 days to get inside the wall?" Derek voiced frustration at the Order Alliance, that after all the money they had dumped into their defenses, the work was still taking 10 days. Cedric dismissed it as typical of their contractors, all talk and no substance. Derek worried about whether they would be okay until then. Cedric grimly concluded that all they could do was pray their bodies held out. Scene shift, revealing a Holy Knight standing calmly beside a tree. With composed authority, he began explaining that mana art was a process of utilizing mana as if it were part of one's own body, enhancing both physical capabilities and weapons. He noted that anyone with a bit of talent could use it, but its true power depended on proficiency. At higher levels, it was said to be a basic technique capable of splitting mountains and seas. Without further delay, he demonstrated a technique known as Sacred Fire Slash. Rex watched with sparkling admiration, his excitement barely contained as he praised Lord Raymond, seeing him as the very embodiment of perfection and the hope of all Holy Knights. Then Holy Knight asked Rex to back off, yet Rex's reverence was clear and says keep up the good work. Jean, however, observed more critically. The display felt familiar to him, almost as if he had seen something like it before. Jean then saw the tree cut in half and says, "Is that a proper man art?" Though undeniably stronger than what an apprentice knight could achieve, he questioned himself whether such a level truly required a formal technique. Still, Raymond's voice cut through his thoughts, urging him to focus. Raymond continued his explanation, describing how flexing the arm caused veins to rise and muscles to contract. In that state, one held mana within the muscles. Jean then realized it's a concept that closely mirrored what Claire had previously taught him. As Jean concentrated, he suddenly became aware of the immense flow of mana coursing through his body, and wondered since when did he have his much mana inside him. He realized it's a calm and light flow of mana, which was Clary's mana. Raymond instructed him to gradually consume that mana, suggesting that moving the body could help at first. But when Raymond turned toward Jean, he was shocked as Jean was using mana arts right after learning it, and was more concerned about the ominous mana around Jin's sword. Raymond says mana arts take their color and form based on the influence of one's mental world, and to have such mana that feels so ominous is concerning and wonder what's inside of Jin's world. As Jean followed the guidance and slashes the air with his sword, he questioned whether this sensation stemmed from his low proficiency, that it feels pretty inefficient than what he saw earlier. Yet he could not deny how exhilarating it felt and say he can't wait to try it out in real combat. Then we saw a giant transport turtle walking. Claire, astonished, asked Jean had he already grasped mana art, acknowledging that such mastery could not have come easily. Jean credited Claire for his progress, but his concern quickly shifted to her well-being. He recalled how, during a previous encounter, her mana had seemed to flow into him. Claire reassured him that she was fine, brushing it off as a simple gift in return for him saving her earlier. Despite her casual tone, Jean could not ignore that the amount of mana involved had been far too great to dismiss so easily. Still, he admitted that it had allowed him to pick up mana art much faster. Nearby, Rex scoffed at Jin's excitement, mocking him for celebrating something so basic. He warned him not to slack off and reminded him to remain grateful that Lord Raymond had taken time to train someone like him. The remark carried a hint of bitterness, likely lingering from a previous defeat. Jean smiles and says it's perfect as he was getting bored and should bruise Rex's ego a bit and pick a fight. Jean then slapped the horse's back, which sent the Rex's horse galloping. Raymond saw and says to Jean that he will keep Rex in check. Before the tension could settle, a loud commotion erupted nearby. Someone demanded food impatiently and demanded to bring the food faster. Jin's attention shifted, questioning what was happening. Raymond says it was nothing unusual, just the employers, the sons of the Golden Bug, throwing another tantrum. Ever since the death of Golden Bug Wolf, they had been binge-eating uncontrollably, reacting violently to even the slightest delay in their meals. The advice given was simple: ignore it, or it would only become a headache. Jean, however, found the situation unsettling. It seemed far too extreme to be dismissed as mere stress-induced behavior. A growing sense of unease crept into his thoughts. The more food that disappeared, the stronger something felt, as if an unseen presence was swelling in power. It gave him a chilling impression that a monster was on the verge of bursting out. Suddenly, chaos erupted and Tarrasque fell to the ground. When Raymond inquired about the situation, the guards says that the Tarrasque carrying their clients began rampaging violently, throwing everything into disarray. Orders were shouted, and Rex immediately responded to Raymond's command and rushed toward their client carriage. Raymond says the client's safety is their top priority and ordered Rex to calm Tarrasque down or kill it if needed. But we see his spikes bursting from client tent, and a monster came out. Claire shouted that it's an abomination and explained to Jean that it's a human who had transformed into a monster under the influence of the demonic realm's karma. Jean then firsthand saw what abomination is: a human who turned into a monster. Raymond did not hesitate. With swift precision, he unleashed Sacred Fire Slash. Raymond called out to Rex just as a tentacle lashed toward him. Rex reacted instantly, cutting it down with precision. But in the next moment, Raymond noticed the severed limb regenerating. His eyes widened. The monster was already behind Rex. There was no time to warn him. Raymond rushed forward, pushing his body to the limit, but he couldn't make it in time. In a single, horrifying motion, the monster devoured Rex. A lone, bloodied hand flew in the air, everything that remained of him. Raymond stood frozen for a heartbeat, shock gripping him. Then it twisted into pure rage. Mana surged violently through his body as he unleashed Sacred Fire Slash, cleaving through the monster in a blazing arc and cutting it down. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, tearing into the collapsing mass, desperately calling out to Rex, urging him to hold on, insisting he would save him, no matter what. But the nightmare wasn't over. From the remains, a tentacle shot out, aiming straight for Raymond, who was too consumed to notice. At the last possible moment, Jean dashed in, intercepting the strike and pulling Raymond away before the attack could land and drag him to a safe distance. Panic spread across the battlefield as someone shouted that the Holy Knight was down. Someone commented, "Are we all going to die?" Jean, however, remained still, his thoughts racing. As monster continues to regenerate itself, Jean recognized that the abomination before them had once been human, a realization that unsettled him. For a brief moment, he wondered if he keep eating internal cores, he might end up like that someday. But he quickly dismissed the thought, reminding himself that worrying now would solve nothing. What mattered was getting rid of the monster. As he observed it closely, he noted its terrifying traits, its incredible digestion and endless regeneration. At this rate, the fight would turn into a battle of attrition. He decided he had to conserve his stamina and find its weakness. He was being pushed back by the monster. Then he saw a sphere coming toward the monster that blew tentacles. Jean turned back, and just then, Jonathan gave a thumbs up, declaring that they would help Jean, and Claire began to chant magic spell. imbuing their sword that would strike down evil. As magic attacks landed, mercenaries noticed the change immediately. They pointed out that the creature's regeneration was slowing down and urged everyone to stop the severed pieces from reattaching, insisting they had to pull their weight too. Their combined effort began to turn the tide, and Jean quietly acknowledged that they were holding up better than expected. He had thought they would all be paralyzed by fear. The monster's remains suddenly twitched again. Jean sensed it immediately that its energy had changed. Before anyone could react, a face formed at the center of its body, followed by two more, emerging on the right and left, twisting into place. Amid the clash, someone pointed out the presence of the golden bug sons, adding tension to the already chaotic scene. In the next instant, its tentacles spread out once again and stole its flesh back, but Jin slashed it halfway before it could attach itself, gain more power. The monster screamed and attacked Jean that pushed him back. Jonathan called out to Jean, asking if he was all right. He reassured them that he was fine, but warned them to be careful, that the creature had grown stronger. Jean came to the conclusion that they got strongest when Golden Bug's face appeared. When asked what to do next, he explained that they simply had to keep hacking away at it. If they kept cutting, only the internal core would remain, but the real problem was its regeneration speed. That concern was quickly countered as confidence rose, and Jonathan showed his signature thumbs up and says even if creature had grown stronger, they had also learned its attack patterns. With that, Jean stepped forward, declaring that he would slice it to his heart's content, using his mana arts as he charged in, and slice through its tentacles like chopping meat for party. The group followed his lead, shouting to stop its regeneration as they struck relentlessly, preventing the creature from recovering. And Jean reached the core and says it's over before slicing in half. As the chaos fades, exhaustion takes over. The monster's core lay on the ground, still yet ominous. A wave of relief and excitement swept through them as celebrating that they had defeated such a terrifying abomination. It was said that their reputation would surely soar after this, and Jean praised everyone for their efforts as he looked down at the monster's core. At the side, someone remarked in disbelief that another had survived as well. And we see a woman with red hair and nice curves, watching the mercenaries from the side, hiding behind the tree, saying that the Golden Bug's sons, Derek and Cedric, were no different from their father, wondering how they could be so utterly incompetent and useless with a tear down her face. Then, she noticed something else. Jean was seen taking the internal core from the remains of the abomination, prompting a quiet question about why he would take the internal core. In the quiet of the forest at night, Jean sits alone by a small campfire, calmly holding a glowing monster core. After a brief look, he brings it to his mouth and bites into it, casually chewing despite the danger. The moment he consumes it, his vision distorts. He is suddenly pulled into someone else's memory. A grotesque scene unfolds before him. A fat man strapped tightly to a stone table, struggling helplessly. A cold voice echoes, stating that the fact that his father, Golden Bug, died is simply the result of his incompetence. Then a curvy woman steps forward, telling him that if he wants to live, he must show results, show how special he is, and prove whether he is worth joining her. The man struggles desperately, but she shows no mercy. Without hesitation, she pours a strange blue liquid into his eyes. Something unnatural happens. From his eyes, small tentacle-like growths begin to emerge. The scene ends abruptly. Jean is thrown back into reality, collapsing to his knees as nausea overwhelms him. Sweat drips down his face as he vomits. He steadies himself, recalling that this happens very rarely, that eating an internal core can grant a monster's power, but sometimes it also forces him to absorb that monster's memories. These internal cores are full of side effects. He begins to piece it together. The memory he just witnessed. Could it have belonged to one of the Golden Bug's sons? The transformation, the abomination, it matches what is said about humans being influenced by karma, which raises a chilling question. If those creatures were created that way, then the liquid must have contained karma. And if that's true, then that woman could be a dark priest. Before he can think further, Claire approaches from behind, urging that they need to leave immediately. She notices his condition right away, questioning why he is sweating so much and what happened, her suspicion rising as she wonders if he has eaten another internal core. Jean hesitates internally. He questions whether he should tell anyone, but quickly realizes how impossible it would be to explain that he saw a monster's memories as a side effect. Saying something like that would only cause misunderstanding. So he brushes it off, telling her not to worry, that it's nothing. For now, he decides to keep it a secret. As he walks back toward the group, unaware, a curvy woman watches them silently from behind a tree, her gaze sharp with interest. She questions whether he is plotting something, intrigued by the fact that someone who eats raw internal cores is operating alongside the Order Alliance. Curiosity lingers in her thoughts, wondering if, when they meet again, they will stand as allies or enemies. The scene shifts. A grave, the resting place of Rex. The Holy Knight and mercenaries assemble as Raymond offers prayers to Ea, the god of harmony. He speaks of Rex's bravery, of how he dedicated his entire life to peace, and asks that his passing not be in vain. Jean watches quietly, reflecting that although they only dueled once, Rex had seemed young, making his death all the more unfortunate. Then something catches Raymond's attention. A red wolf appears. Seeing it, Raymond lowers his head in gratitude, believing it to be a sign from EA. Jean, confused, asks what he is doing. Raymond explains his belief, as the Order considers the red wolf to be the closest companion of the god of harmony, that the appearance of the red wolf means EA is comforting them. Jean, puzzled, casually remarks that it is just his pet. Raymond reacts immediately, calling it blasphemy, insisting that a red wolf is a sacred being that cannot be tamed. Jean realizes Raymond doesn't believe him, so he calls out to it. At his command, the red wolf instantly responds, lowering itself obediently before him. Raymond is stunned. Even the Order could not tame such a creature, yet Jean commands it so easily. When Jean casually explains that he killed a werewolf and it started following him afterward, Raymond is left completely speechless. The red wolf quietly sits beside Rex's grave. After a moment, Raymond makes a request. He asks Jean if the wolf has no name, to name it Rex. He explains that calling such a sacred being a mutt is inappropriate, and more importantly, he wishes for Rex's will, his resolve to fight evil, to live on through it. Jean considers it. Then he turns to the wolf, asking if it is okay with that. The wolf nods. With that, Jean agrees. From now on, it will be called Rex. Raymond expresses his gratitude. Just then, a new presence approaches from behind, an elderly figure accompanied by monks, casually remarking whether he arrived at a bad time. Jean observes him carefully, realizing that if he is truly an elder, then he must be one of the highest authorities in the area. The elder of the third pioneer city has arrived. The mercenaries stepped forward as the Holy Knight Raymond greeted the arriving figure with respect, addressing him as elder. The elder offered an apology for visiting during such a grieving time, but Raymond dismissed it, calmly asking what had brought him here. The elder explained that he had come because an investigation was required regarding the deaths of the Golden Bug sons. Raymond paused, questioning whether the elder still believed their deaths were the work of the mercenaries. Jean, observing silently, realized with slight surprise that they were under suspicion. It made sense to him. After all, the client had died while they were transporting an enormous fortune, so naturally, suspicion had fallen on the mercenaries. Raymond insisted that his evidence should have been sufficient, but the elder acknowledged that while the evidence was solid, the mystery of how the victims had turned into abominations remained unsolved. He added that he could sense the lingering presence of a dark priest behind the incident before suddenly turning his attention to Jean. Jean was caught off guard, wondering how the elder even knew his name. Suspicion crept into his thoughts, and he directly asked whether the elder suspected him of being a dark priest. Elder said nothing. The scene shifted to the third pioneer city, inside the training grounds of Vritra Arena, where Jean stood alongside the elder and Raymond. The elder began explaining that individuals with great strength usually displayed their talent from a young age. Yet, Jin had appeared out of nowhere, rapidly accomplishing one extraordinary feat after another. On top of that, he had coincidentally been involved in the abomination incident. From the elder's perspective, this made Jin highly suspicious, even to himself. Jin responded calmly, noticing that people in this place seemed to keep close track of the strong. Given that, he admitted it made sense why he might appear shady, especially since he was not from this world. Still, Jin questioned what any of that had to do with sparring. He couldn't understand why the elder insisted on it. Raymond stepped in, agreeing with Jin and pointing out that Jin had only recently come out of a battle and was not in perfect condition. Jin supported this, but the elder merely chuckled, questioning whether they were refusing to cooperate with the investigation. Raymond found the elder completely unreasonable, while Jin found himself in a difficult position. He couldn't simply attack someone who suspected him of being a dark priest, especially not an old man. It felt troublesome in every way. The elder, noticing Jin's hesitation, teased him, asking if he was worried simply because of his age. Then, without warning, a powerful martial aura surged from him as he declared that his position as an elder had been earned purely through strength. In an instant, he moved. Jin barely registered the speed before the elder struck with his bare hand, using a technique known as the Great Bell Strike. The impact forced a cough from Jin as he was sent flying back into the corner wall. Raymond, watching with concern, quickly warned Jin that the Vritra monks were martial artists of immense combat strength, and that the elder was the strongest among them. As the elder charged again, Raymond urged Jin not to let his guard down even for a second. The elder laughed, accusing Raymond of being biased. He warned that if Raymond kept taking Jin's side, he might grow jealous and lose control of his strength. Jin barely managed to dodge the next attack. The elder showed a flicker of surprise, impressed by the evasion. Meanwhile, Jin's thoughts raced. The elder had caught his blade with bare hands, and the strike had landed on the exact same spot where the abomination had injured him. Then something clicked. Jin realized his body was completely healed. Those injuries from fighting the abomination should have left him bedridden for at least 2 weeks were gone, and even the damage from the recent attack was already healing. A realization dawned on him. Perhaps consuming the monster core had granted him abilities similar to the abomination. A grin spread across his face as he recognized it for what it was, a complete jackpot. Without hesitation, he launched a counterattack. The elder, energized, remarked that this hardly looked like someone injured from battle. Jin's display only fired him up further. Yet inwardly, the elder admitted he would have liked to continue sparring, but he restrained himself. He had already confirmed the rumors of Jin's strength, and it was time for the next step. Forming a hand sign, the elder activated his mind's eye. A brief vision revealed the past, how he had achieved this ability by emptying himself completely, even sacrificing his physical sight to awaken a third eye. Back in the present, the mind's eye activated, an ability that pierced through to the very essence of the soul. Within Jin's mental world, the elder demanded to see the truth, whether Jin was a dark priest or a rising light. At first, he saw a praying mantis-like creature and ordered it to retreat, but as he looked deeper, he was stunned. Countless monsters resided within Jin's mental world. Returning to reality, Jin steadied the elder, placing a hand on his shoulder and asking if he was all right. He noticed that the elder's mana could no longer be sensed. The elder, shaken, reflected on what he had witnessed, a world beyond unpleasant, something truly terrifying, and it was his first time seeing something like that. Yet Jin's mental world had not collapsed, which meant he was not a dark priest. With that conclusion, the elder folded his hands and offered a sincere apology, asking for forgiveness for his rudeness, explaining that confirming Jin's identity had been extremely important. Jin, confused by the sudden shift, questioned what had just happened. At that moment, footsteps echoed from behind. A woman approached, explaining that the reason was because she wanted to entrust Jin with a quest related to the Dark Priest. When Jin asked who she was, she introduced herself politely as Cindy, the youngest daughter of the Golden Bug. The scene shifted to a dense forest, where Jean stood alongside Cindy and the elder, surrounded by an unsettling stillness. Cindy began explaining that this was not the first time an abomination had appeared. Recently, with the third pioneer city as the epicenter, many people had been turning into abominations. Even the surrounding forests were rapidly being corrupted into the demonic realm. Jean echoed the thought in his mind, trying to process the scale of what was happening. Cindy then announced that they had arrived. Ahead of them, several monks stood guard around a strange object known as the Rift Core, an entity that spread the demonic realm. Any area where a Rift Core appeared would gradually transform into that twisted demonic domain. The monks chanted continuously, offering prayers and pleading for mercy upon the land. Jean observed silently, realizing that purifying a Rift Core was far from an easy task. After a moment, he turned to Cindy and asked whether the power of karma was supposed to weaken the farther one moved from the Northern Empire. Cindy confirmed that he was correct. Jean concluded that for something like this to be happening, there had to be someone behind it. And Cindy confirms it, a dark priest. Cindy says if the number of abominations and rift cores continued increasing at this rate, the third pioneer city, built with immense effort, would face grave danger. The elder added that in the worst-case scenario, they could lose the entire city. That was why they had painstakingly searched for the Dark Priest's hideout, and they had finally discovered a suspected location for their base. With that, the elder asked Jean if he would join them in an extermination operation in 2 weeks. Cindy added that he would be compensated with the highest level of pay. Jean remained silent for a moment, thoughts racing. This was the reason they had sought him out. A request from figures as influential as the elder of the third pioneer city and the sole remaining descendant of the Golden Bug. A request from such big shots. For the first time, he felt that he had truly been acknowledged. The scene shifted once more. A massive Tartaquas trudged forward, carrying the mercenaries' luggage as they traveled. Claire let out a relieved sigh, admitting how worried she had been. If Jean had been framed as a dark priest, death would have been inevitable, and she had heard that such individuals were brutally tortured. Jean reacted in shock at the thought of being tortured. Claire then pointed ahead, announcing their arrival. Before them stood an enormous city, Wall City Yurgis, a scale incomparable to the pioneer cities. It was known as the safest place in the world. Jean stared at it, wondering if he would ever be able to live there someday. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. Now was not the time. Turning to Raymond, Jean called out to him. Raymond glanced back before ordering the group to take a short break. Everyone takes their place to rest. That was when Jonathan reacted with surprise, questioning Jin's sudden decision to leave for the third pioneer city. Jean explained that he had received a new request. Jonathan found it abrupt, though he admitted that parting ways after a job was normal in their line of work. It still felt a little sad. Jean agreed and then asked what the rest of them planned to do next. Jonathan responded with his usual carefree attitude and signature thumbs up, saying he would drink, then drink some more. One of his companions immediately agreed, planning to do exactly the same. Jean could only shake his head at them before turning to Claire and ask Claire her plan. Claire admitted that she would have to look for another job. Although the payout from this mission had been decent, it was still far from enough for her goal, getting into the magic tower. Jean asked about it, and Claire explained that although she called herself a mage, her knowledge was mostly basic. Her skills were barely beyond beginner level. While she had no trouble making a living, she had grown ambitious and wanted to learn higher-class magic. That was why she was saving money to attend the magic tower, a place where advanced magic could be learned. Jean compared it to a magical university and found her determination admirable. After a brief pause, he reached into his bag and pulled out his money pouch, offering it to her, and asked if it will be enough. Claire was stunned, unable to understand what he meant. Jean clarified that it was to help her get into the magic tower. She immediately refused, saying she could not possibly accept something like that. It felt too shameless. Jean calmly explained that he was not giving it away for free. He considered himself indebted to her, and this was his way of repaying that debt, a gift. Even Jonathan was shocked by the sheer amount. Claire hesitated, overwhelmed, but Jean had already placed the pouch in her hands. He simply told her that he would see her again. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thanked him, promising that she would repay the favor no matter what. Jean then bid farewell to everyone, telling them to take care. Jonathan responded confidently, signaling that they would be fine. Jean took one last look back before turning away and walking forward, leaving the group behind as their cheers echoed in the distance. Nearby, a red wolf, Rex, stood beside Raymond. Raymond gently bid farewell to it as well. Without hesitation, Rex turned and followed after Jean. The scene shifted to a new location, where several soldiers stood gathered near a fortress. From above the fortress walls, Cindy and Elder Bao quietly watched Jean from afar. Cindy remarked that although she had claimed nothing would happen, the way the Elder had stormed out earlier made it seem as though he was worried. Elder Bao dismissed the comment, asking what she was talking about. Cindy clarified that she was referring to Jean. The Elder himself had admitted that Jean appeared to have absorbed a core. The Elder replied that simply absorbing a core did not automatically make someone a dark priest. Cindy let out a dry laugh, calling that a dangerous assumption. According to common knowledge, anyone who absorbed a core would eventually become intoxicated by power and lose their sense of self. Then her tone shifted, addressing him not as Elder, but as Master. She asked him honestly whether he was protecting Jean because he still hoped there was some humanity left within some mystery person. Elder remember a mysterious masked figure who silently stood in the shadows. Elder Bao refused to continue the conversation, but Cindy apologized if she had overstepped. Even so, she made her position clear. For now, she would keep the matter secret, but if Jean ever did anything suspicious, she would personally expose him as a dark priest. And when that happened, even the Elder who vouched for him would not escape unharmed. After saying that, she turned and walked away. Once she was gone, Elder Bao quietly muttered that such a thing would never happen. Through his mind's eye, he had witnessed Jean absorb countless cores and grow so powerful that the depths of his strength were impossible to measure. Yet despite all of that, Jin's mindscape had not collapsed. To the Elder, that was undeniable proof that Jean had retained his humanity even after absorbing so many cores. That was why they were keeping the truth hidden from the world. For now, the world simply was not ready to accept Jean yet. But the Elder believed firmly that the power Jean possessed would one day become a great hope for humanity. Elsewhere, Jean marched alongside the soldiers of the 1st Expeditionary Force. One of the soldiers loudly recited a battle prayer, speaking of times to love and times to hate, times of peace and times to fight. The man dramatically pointed toward his own hand, declaring that faith itself had ordered him to draw his sword and eradicate evil. Right beside them, Jean calmly smashed a stone against his own head. The surrounding soldiers froze in shock. Whispers spread among them as they stared at him in disbelief, wondering who this insane man was. Meanwhile, Jean casually counted upward while the wound on his head regenerated before their eyes. He realized that the special ability he had gained after finally absorbing another core was regeneration. Minor bruises and shallow wounds took around 10 minutes to heal, while the fracture caused by the beast had fully healed within only 2 days. That led him to wonder just how far the ability could go. If his arm were ripped off entirely, could he regenerate it within a month? The more convinced he became that consuming monster cores was absolutely worth it. He could hardly wait to test the ability in real combat. One of the expedition soldiers awkwardly admitted that he had heard the nickname Skull Crusher before, but never imagined it referred to someone literally smashing their own skull. Jean apologized for startling them, explaining that he had simply wanted to test something. At that moment, they were introduced to Roland, Supreme Commander of the Expeditionary Force and member of the Order of Harmony. Roland enthusiastically declared that he liked geniuses like Jean, insisting that true geniuses had to be at least a little insane. Jean awkwardly questioned why he kept being called a genius. Roland explained that anyone personally recommended by Elder Bao had to be extraordinary. Internally, Jean groaned. He already wanted nothing to do with this overly energetic commander. Trying to redirect the conversation, Jean asked about the actual plan. Roland immediately praised him again for thinking like a genius before explaining the operation. Their destination was the forest north of the third pioneer city. First, they would eliminate the rift cores near the entrance, then push directly toward the center. Depending on the situation, the battle could vary in length, but the goal was to finish everything within 10 days. Jean found that excessive. The forest was not even that large. Roland laughed, claiming that this was exactly why Jean was a genius. Under normal circumstances, 10 days would indeed be more than enough. But before he could finish speaking, a mole-like creature suddenly burst from the ground and attacked. Without even interrupting his explanation, Roland calmly stated that the rift cores had expanded the territory of demonic beasts. One of the soldiers shouted in panic. In a single instant, Roland drew his sword and sliced the creature clean in half. Creatures that normally stayed deep within the cursed lands were now appearing openly in areas like this. He admitted honestly that even 10 days might not be enough anymore. Suddenly, movement rippled beneath the soil. The soldiers immediately recognized it as an ambush and prepared for battle as numerous beasts burst from underground. Jean instantly recognized them as bloodsucker rats and was shocked to discover they could dig through the earth. Roland barked orders, warning everyone to fight while protecting their backs. Turning one's back on these creatures meant certain death. He shouted toward Jean, warning him to be careful, but Jean had already been isolated. The bloodsucker rats completely surrounded him and lunged in from every direction. Yet instead of retaliating immediately, Jean remained calm. Roland stared in disbelief, demanding to know what he was doing and whether he had gone insane. The moment the rats blocked everyone's view of him, Jean finally moved. As the creatures shrieked around him, he began slaughtering them while devouring their cores one after another. Inside his mind, excitement surged. If he consumed all of them, would he gain the bloodsucker rat's abilities as well? Tunneling itself did not seem particularly useful, but that hardly mattered anymore. At this point, the demonic beasts before him no longer looked like monsters. To Jean, they looked like nothing more than walking cores. Surrounded by the corpses of demonic beasts, Jean grabbed one mana core after another and began devouring them in search of inheritance abilities. He knew better than anyone that consuming monster essence carried a very small chance of granting the abilities of the magical beast itself. That secret was the true reason he had managed to survive for 12 years within the demonic realm. After consuming dozens of cores, Jean finally began to feel full. By his estimate, he had already eaten around 40 of them. He wondered if he had finally inherited the bloodsucker rat's digging ability. But before he could continue, someone suddenly reached toward him. A soldier shouted, asking whether the mercenary was all right. Jean quickly warned him to stay back, insisting that it was dangerous and telling him to maintain formation because he was perfectly fine. Internally, however, Jean cursed the interruption. At this rate, he would not be able to secretly consume mana cores anymore. The soldier ignored the warning and forcefully pulled Jean out from the swarm, reassuring him that they were safe now. At that very moment, the holy choir began. Roland and his subordinates raised violins and began playing a powerful melody that weakened the bloodsucker rats. At the same time, the soldiers felt a surge of energy course through their bodies. Their resistance and defense increased dramatically, and morale instantly skyrocketed. Jean quickly realized this was the effect of the holy choir's support buff. More importantly, he had completely misunderstood Roland. He had assumed the commander was a swordsman, but in reality, he was a support-type fighter. The expedition soldiers roared as they launched their counterattack, cutting down the bloodsucker rats one after another. Once the battle ended, the soldiers gathered to record the results. The officials explained that the records would determine everyone's rewards, so cooperation was required. Meanwhile, several soldiers stared at Jean in utter confusion. First, he had smashed his own head with a rock. Then he had recklessly charged into the middle of the monsters. And now he was digging through dirt like a madman. Ignoring the strange looks, Jean continued digging while muttering to himself in disappointment. It seemed he had failed to acquire the digging ability after all. Inheritance abilities truly depended entirely on luck. At that moment, Roland approached him and asked whether he was all right. Jean apologized for making him worry, but Roland waved it off enthusiastically, calling the battle amazing. He admitted that when Jean charged into the monsters alone, he genuinely thought he was going to die. But the final results spoke for themselves. Roland revealed that he had heard Jean killed 267 bloodsucker rats by himself. An average soldier only managed 4 or 5 kills, while even holy knights usually defeated around 100 to 150. To Roland, it was further proof that geniuses were truly incredible. Inside, Jean groaned once again at the constant genius talk. Honestly, if he had not spent so much time secretly eating manticores, the situation could have turned disastrous. Trying to shift the topic, Jean asked Roland whether he was actually a support-type fighter. Roland looked genuinely confused by the question and wondered whether Jean was looking down on supports. Jean clarified that he had simply imagined Roland as someone obsessed with overwhelming power, so the reality surprised him. Roland laughed and admitted that Jin's assumption was not entirely wrong. He had originally wanted to become a swordsman as well. Curious, Jean asked why he did not pursue it. Roland explained that the Order of Harmony fought for peace. Too many people had lost their homes and lives because of the demonic domain. So, he chose the role that would help the world the most. His swordsmanship was only slightly above average, but his musical talent was among the very best in the order. He proudly declared that he was exceptionally skilled with music. Jean found himself reconsidering his impression of Roland. Beneath all the constant chatter about geniuses, Roland was actually a far better person than he had expected. Interested, Jean asked whether Roland could demonstrate some of his musical abilities. Roland happily agreed, and so the night quietly passed. 1 week later, the expedition continued marching deeper into the demonic domain. As they destroyed rift cores and fought creatures such as kobolds and big-eared beasts, Roland reminded everyone that the deeper they advanced, the stronger the monsters would become. He asked his executives about the soldiers' morale. The response surprised him. The troops were far more motivated than they had been at the beginning of the expedition. The reason quickly became obvious. Whenever monsters appeared, Jean would charge ahead and handle them almost entirely by himself. At that very moment, Jean effortlessly sliced through blue goblins in a single motion before instantly killing a massive rabbit-like beast. Immediately afterward, he consumed its core. A moment later, disappointment crossed his face once again. Another failed inheritance. Back inside Roland's tent, one of the soldiers explained that Jin's overwhelming performance was the reason morale remained so high. Roland laughed, teasing his executives by saying that being outperformed by a mere mercenary must have been embarrassing for the order. However, one executive did not find it amusing. He argued that the soldiers had grown too relaxed, and despite contributing less, they would still receive great rewards. Roland, however, saw no issue with that. Thanks to Jean, almost nobody had been injured. If monsters this strong were appearing, it only meant they were nearing their objective. For now, they should rest while they still could. Elsewhere, deep within a hidden dungeon-like structure dominated by a towering spire, four mysterious individuals gathered together. One of them questioned why people from the Order of Harmony were approaching. Another demanded to know how their location had been discovered. A Kirby woman calmly responded that with so many rift cores scattered throughout the area, it would have been stranger if nobody became suspicious. Even so, she believed their young star had already predicted this outcome. Their chosen prodigy could never be incompetent. Nearby, a man wearing a pointed hat reassured everyone not to worry. Defenders always held the advantage over attackers. The enemy's response had merely arrived slightly faster than expected, but only slightly. No matter what happened, the great plan of darkness could not be interrupted. Back with Roland's expedition party, the group continued marching deeper into the demonic territory. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a dead end. Roland stared ahead in disbelief, admitting that although he had witnessed many insane things before, this was something else entirely. Before them stretched an enormous pit. Far below, gigantic spider-like beasts lurked in the darkness. Standing at the edge of the enormous abyss, Roland turned toward a holy priest and asked whether this was truly their destination. The priest confirmed it without hesitation, explaining that the corrupt energy of the demonic realm was heavily concentrated there. Roland stared into the pit in disbelief. He admitted that he had never heard of a place like this existing before. The entire structure felt deeply unnatural. Jean quietly observed the area before commenting that something about it felt strange. Roland asked him what he meant. Jean explained that in most battles, holding the high ground was advantageous. Yet instead of building a hideout above, the enemy had dug an enormous pit and established their base deep underground. Roland suggested that perhaps it was meant to avoid exposure. But Jean immediately countered that if concealment were the goal, tunnels would have been far more practical. Roland paused, realizing the logic in Jin's words, and asked why they would construct something like this instead. In Jin's opinion, there was only one explanation. It was a trap. The moment those words left his mouth, a deafening noise erupted behind them. Soldiers were suddenly thrown, screaming, into the air. One of them shouted in terror as a gigantic creature emerged. Bigfoot, a monstrous beast standing between 4 and 7 meters tall, possessing overwhelming physical strength. Alongside it slithered another creature, Salmosa, a snake-like monster with durable skin and deadly venom. The Bigfoot slammed its massive hand into the ground, shattering the earth beneath the soldiers' feet and sending them flying. Some were even thrown directly into the abyss, where giant spiders waited below to devour them. Roland cursed loudly as chaos spread throughout the battlefield. He immediately ordered everyone to prioritize dealing with the Bigfoots before more soldiers fell into the pit. Some soldiers panicked, claiming the monsters were too large to handle. Roland urgently ordered the Holy Choir to cast support buffs as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Jean stepped forward with excitement rising inside him. He was ready to test his new strength. The massive Bigfoot charged toward him, but Jean swiftly dodged the attack and deliberately retreated, drawing the monster away from the main battlefield. Roland and the soldiers watched as Jean and the creature disappeared deeper toward the abyss. Jean quickly realized that the monster pursuing him was the largest of the pack, the strongest among them. Wrapped around its arm was the venomous snake monster. Instead of fear, Jean grinned. The two creatures plunged into the abyss together. Just before reaching the bottom, Jean slammed his sword into the wall like a hook, stopping his fall midway. Nearby spider webs stretched across the pit, and Jean immediately used them to his advantage. As he maneuvered through the air, he analyzed his opponent. The Bigfoot possessed the mobility to navigate the terrain despite its size, overwhelming close combat strength, and ranged poison attacks from the snake wrapped around its arm. To Jean, every single one of those abilities was incredibly desirable. The monster looked absolutely delicious. Using the spider web like a swing, Jean launched himself forward at full speed toward the creature. As he fought, he carefully analyzed the pair. Normally, when two monsters fought together, their combined strength did not simply add together. It multiplied. But monsters like this always shared a weakness. Just as it was difficult for Jean to fight two opponents simultaneously, it was equally difficult for the monsters to perfectly synchronize their two separate bodies. No matter how coordinated they seemed, eventually instinct would override teamwork. And that moment finally arrived. Jean slipped directly into the Bigfoot's blind spot and attacked. The monster instinctively used the snake wrapped around its arm to block the strike. In a single slash, Jean severed the snake. A grin spread across his face. This was exactly how one hunted two monsters at once. Without wasting the opening, Jin's blade flashed again, cleanly slicing through the Bigfoot's head. Both massive corpses crashed lifelessly onto the ground below. Jean calmly remarked that the creature had been a fairly decent gatekeeper. Then he sensed an unusual surge of mana radiating from the snake monster's core. For some reason, the core gave him a strange feeling, though he brushed it aside and consumed it anyway. The moment he absorbed it, realization struck him. He could now instinctively distinguish which monster cores carried inheritance abilities. After devouring so many monster cores, he was beginning to acquire increasingly bizarre powers. To him, this was an enormous haul. Excited, Gene prepared to check what kind of ability he had gained this time. But suddenly, a fireball exploded toward him and engulfed him entirely. Nearby, a man wearing a pointed hat laughed mockingly, ridiculing Gene for acting so relaxed inside enemy territory. Then the man's expression froze. Gene casually walked out of the flames unharmed. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, Gene sighed in disappointment. He had really hoped the inheritance this time would have been the poison ability instead. Gene examined the new power he had just acquired and immediately realized it was not the ability he originally wanted. Still, it seemed incredibly useful. As he reflected on it, he wondered whether this new inheritance was the reason he had managed to block the fire attack earlier. Whatever the case, it was clearly an ability worth investigating further. Before he could think more about it, another fireball shot directly toward him. This time, Gene drew his sword and slashed straight through the flames. The battle was far from over. The man in the pointed hat stared in disbelief after seeing his attack blocked twice. A realization slowly dawned on him. Could this really be that insane bastard rumored to wander among humans while devouring monster cores? If it truly was him, then the Dark Priest concluded he would have to fight seriously. At that moment, spider-like legs burst out from behind the man as he lunged toward Gene. Gene instantly recognized it as inheritance. The Dark Priest had likely obtained that ability by consuming the core of a spider-type monster. The Dark Priest admitted that he had wanted to face Gene for a long time and found it almost unbelievable that Gene had simply appeared before him like this. He claimed he was so grateful that he could almost cry. Then, more spiders began gathering around them. Jin's eyes narrowed as he realized the Dark Priest had not come alone. The surrounding spiders suddenly spewed both flames and poison simultaneously. Gene swung his sword to deflect the attacks, but the moment the two forces collided, a violent explosion erupted. Even Gene was shocked by the sheer destructive power created by the combination. The blast was so massive that even those on the upper ground noticed it. Above the pit, Roland stared downward in shock after witnessing the explosion. Deep below, Gene barely managed to survive by absorbing most of the impact, though he was far from unharmed. The Dark Priest praised him, astonished that someone could endure a direct hit from such an attack. At that point, he questioned whether it was even appropriate to call Gene human anymore. Meanwhile, Gene quickly analyzed the situation. The poison gas and flames had combined to create an explosion far stronger than either attack alone. Even with his stone skin ability, the damage was becoming overwhelming. At that moment, Gene fully confirmed his suspicion. This enemy was undoubtedly a Dark Priest, and, just as expected, Dark Priests were not opponents that could be underestimated. Without giving Gene time to recover, the Dark Priest charged forward and challenged him to see how well he could handle close-quarters combat. Gene barely defended against the incoming attacks before retaliating with an aura sword strike. At the same time, the spiders behind the Dark Priest continuously launched venom and fire toward him. Caught between both assaults, Gene found himself pushed into an increasingly desperate position. He realized he should probably eliminate the spiders first, but doing so would not be easy while the Dark Priest kept pressuring him relentlessly. The fire attacks had already severely damaged his internal organs. Both his regeneration and stone skin abilities were reaching their limits. He could not endure much longer. Even then, the Dark Priest continued attacking without pause. Gene quietly muttered that now there was only one thing left he could do. But before he could finish speaking, one of the Dark Priest's spider legs pierced directly through his body. The Dark Priest laughed with fascination. Now he understood why the others had left Gene alone. Not only had Gene blocked his attacks using what the Dark Priest mockingly called a shabby skill, but he had even used mana arts. To him, Gene was far too valuable to simply kill. Pulling the spider leg free from Jin's body, the Dark Priest suddenly offered him a proposal. He invited Gene to join the Dark Priests. If Gene accepted, The Dark Priest promised to spare his life. In his view, it was not a bad offer at all. The Dark Priest argued that abilities obtained through monster cores made people special, but ordinary humans feared that kind of power. They would eventually try to suppress it and label anyone who used it a Dark Priest. According to him, the same fate awaited Jean eventually. The only reason Jean remained safe now was because he happened to be associated with the Order Alliance. But once people discovered he wielded the power of monster cores, would they still see him as human? The Dark Priest extended his hand, urging Jean to join forces with those who shared the same circumstances. Together, they could become stronger and enjoy even greater power. Jean rejected the offer instantly. Then, with cold disgust in his voice, he asked why a clown like the Dark Priest talked so much. The Dark Priest's expression darkened. It seemed Jean needed to be taught a lesson. Meanwhile, Jean quietly admitted that he truly had not wanted to use this power. But the enemy had left him no choice. Dark red mana suddenly began erupting from Jin's body as his appearance slowly transformed. For the first time, genuine shock crossed the Dark Priest's face. Surrounded by the violent crimson aura, Jean coldly told him that he should at least say something that made sense. Then, revealing his new inheritance form, Jean declared one final truth. How could a wolf ever serve a dog? The Dark Priest stared at Jin's transformed appearance in disbelief. He wondered if Jean had been hiding this level of power the entire time. Realizing the danger, he immediately ordered his spiders to attack. He commanded them to turn Jean into ashes. Jean responded by activating Heavenly Punishment. Black lightning infused with a dark aura descended from above and struck the swarm of spiders. The attack completely wiped them out and even engulfed the Dark Priest himself. Although he managed to survive, he was left barely standing. At that moment, he finally realized the enormous gap in power between them. The Dark Priest could not comprehend what kind of monster core Jean had consumed to gain such overwhelming strength. Whatever the answer was, he knew remaining there would only get him killed. He immediately decided to flee. However, the moment he turned around, Jean was already standing behind him. The Dark Priest was shocked. He had not even seen Jean move. Before he could react, Jean grabbed one of his spider legs and tore it off. Then he ripped off another. Agonizing screams echoed throughout the area as the Dark Priest desperately tried to escape. Realizing brute force would not save him, he quickly attempted to negotiate. He begged Jean to wait and suggested they talk things out. According to him, they were both individuals who had consumed monster cores. If they worked together, they could create something far more beneficial for both sides. Jean remained completely uninterested. The only thing he wanted was information regarding the other Dark Priests. The Dark Priest could not understand Jin's actions. He pointed out that Jean used the same kind of power as they did. Eventually, humans would abandon him as well. So why continue siding with them? Jean calmly replied that none of that answered his question. Desperation began creeping into the Dark Priest's voice as he promised to cooperate. However, before he could say anything further, Jin's hand pierced straight through his body. Coldly staring at him, Jean reminded him that he only got one chance. Filled with hatred, the Dark Priest cursed Jean with his final breath before his body gradually dissolved into the air. With the battle finally over, Jin's transformed state disappeared. Blood immediately began flowing from his eyes and nose as he collapsed onto the ground. The burden placed on his body was far greater than he had expected. This was precisely why he hated using that ability. Even activating it for a brief moment placed an enormous strain on him. As his consciousness slowly faded, he noticed Roland approaching from a distance. Relief soon replaced his worries. It looked like everything had worked out in the end. By the time Roland arrived, Jean was barely conscious. Roland immediately ordered his men to bring a stretcher. Looking around at the destruction left behind, he could only wonder what kind of battle Jean had fought down there. Sometime later, back in the third Pioneer City, Jean finally opened his eyes. The first thing he realized was that he had survived. A nearby nurse immediately rushed to inform everyone that the mercenary had awakened. Not long afterward, Roland burst into the room. Relieved to see Jean alive, he informed him that he had been unconscious for 3 entire days. Gene was surprised by the amount of time. Even with his newly acquired regeneration ability, the backlash from his transformation had clearly been severe. He quickly asked about the expedition. Roland explained that most of the surrounding rift cores had been dealt with and casualties had remained minimal, acknowledging that much of the success was thanks to him. Gene jokingly replied that a generous reward would be enough compensation. At the same time, he quietly admitted to himself that he never grew tired of being acknowledged for his efforts. Before their conversation could continue, an officer from the Order Alliance entered the room. He explained that he had come to record Jin's testimony regarding the expedition. The Alliance wanted a detailed account of the opponent he had faced and how the battle had unfolded. When Jin asked why such details were necessary, the officer explained that the battlefield had been too chaotic. According to the reports they had gathered, it was difficult to believe the fight had been between a human and a monster. Hearing that, Gene immediately realized he was still under suspicion. His brief sense of relief vanished as he wondered what kind of explanation he could possibly invent. Before he could answer, Elder Bao suddenly appeared and announced that he would personally handle the matter. The officer questioned what he meant by that, but Elder Bao's response left no room for discussion. When the officer continued pressing the issue, the elder simply repeated himself in a far colder tone and ordered him to leave. Not wanting to provoke him further, the officer immediately complied. Gene thanked Elder Bao for intervening. He admitted that he had been worried people might misunderstand the situation, especially since he had only just regained consciousness. Secretly, Gene found it strange how much interest the elder had shown in him ever since they first met. Elder Bao calmly reassured him that there was nothing to worry about. Regardless of what form Gene took, he had already decided to trust him. Confused by the statement, Gene was about to ask what he meant when the elder revealed something hidden in his possession. The moment Gene saw it, his eyes widened. It was a monster core. Elder Bao explained that it had come from the Dark Priest's body. Rather than handing it over to the Alliance, he had secretly swapped it out and kept it hidden. For some reason, he had a feeling that Gene might want it. Sometime later, Gene was given a new suit. After trying them on, he immediately noticed how different they felt from ordinary clothing. Elder Bao looked at him and commented that the outfit suited him quite well. Gene admitted that it was far beyond simply being comfortable. The fabric felt as though it had become one with his body. If he had known tailored clothes were this good, he would have gotten them much earlier. Elder Bao laughed and told him not to be satisfied after merely trying them on. According to him, the true value of those clothes had nothing to do with comfort. Before Gene could ask what he meant, the elder suddenly launched an aura fist directly at him. The attack landed squarely against Jin's body. Gene immediately cried out in surprise. His first thought was whether this old man had really just punched someone who had spent 3 days in a coma. However, something quickly felt strange. Despite taking the attack head-on, he could barely feel any pain. Elder Bao explained that the suit was actually a relic. Relics were rare and expensive items imbued with magic. Although the suit weighed little more than ordinary beast hide, its defensive power far exceeded that of conventional plate armor. Naturally, he asked whether an item like this was extremely expensive. Elder Bao replied that it was. In fact, some relics were so rare that possessing enough gold did not guarantee obtaining one. Before the conversation could continue, Cindy suddenly appeared carrying a large chest. She opened it and revealed a mountain of gold coins. According to her, this was Jin's reward for the mission, a total of 2,400 gold coins. Even Jin was shocked by the amount. He immediately asked whether it was really acceptable to give him that much money. Elder Bao replied that he had earned every coin. Gene had hunted countless monsters throughout the expedition and had played a major role in dealing with both the Rift Core and the Dark Priest. His contributions were far from ordinary, making such a reward completely justified. Cindy then added that she had secretly included a little extra from herself. Gene could only admire how insane the reward was. Even so, something continued bothering him. He asked why they were treating him so well. After all, excessive kindness was always suspicious. Looking at the two of them, Gene reminded them that they both knew he consumed monster cores. Under normal circumstances, that alone should have made people wary of him. Hearing this, Elder Bao simply chuckled and remarked that even when he treated Jean kindly, the young man still found ways to give him grief. Meanwhile, deep within the pit where the battle had taken place, several soldiers stood guard throughout the night. At one point, one of them suddenly claimed that he had seen something move. His companion immediately dismissed it as the wind. However, the first soldier insisted that something had definitely moved. Before he could finish speaking, a chain suddenly shot out from the darkness and wrapped itself around his neck. The soldier died instantly. A manic laugh echoed through the pit. The remaining guard immediately shouted, demanding to know who was there. However, he met the same fate moments later. As silence returned, several figures emerged from the darkness. They were dark priests. One of the women looked around the battlefield and commented that their youngest member had been defeated by such incompetent fools. The one who used to be known as Enoch had proven himself completely worthless. A yellow-haired man remarked that perhaps there had been opponents stronger than the low-level knights guarding the area. Another man wearing a mask simply shrugged. According to him, it did not matter. He had expected Enoch to lose anyway. As far as their plans were concerned, Enoch had already served his purpose. The female dark priest asked whether he had predicted this outcome from the beginning. The masked man ignored the question and placed his hand against a nearby rock wall. Then he suggested that they should get moving as well. At that moment, a strange symbol appeared beneath his hand. The markings illuminated the stone wall before causing a hidden passageway to open. The masked man then revealed that it was finally time to initiate their plan. A plan designed to wipe out humanity. Beyond the hidden passage, several people could be seen strapped to stone tables. Beside them were containers filled with a mysterious blue liquid. Meanwhile, back at the third Pioneer Mansion, Elder Bao sat together with Jean and Cindy. After a brief silence, the elder admitted that he was in no position to reprimand Jean. Instead, he wished to ask a favor. He wanted Jean to use his formidable power for the sake of humanity. Hearing this, Jean could not help reflecting on his previous fears. He had always assumed that if people discovered he consumed monster cores, they would treat him like a monster. To think they would instead ask him to use that power to help humanity was something he never expected. Looking back, he could only feel grateful. Jean then asked whether anyone else knew his secret. Elder Bao shook his head and explained that, for now, only the two of them knew. Cindy quickly added that most people would probably not react the same way they had. Jean admitted that she was probably right. He then asked how exactly he could help. In response, Elder Bao placed the Dark Priest's monster core on the table. He explained that consuming a monster core occasionally allowed someone to inherit the monster's memories. Normally, the probability was extremely low. However, if the monster had originally been human, the chances increased significantly. Hearing that, Jean immediately realized something. So that was why he had seen the memories of Golden Bus's sons before. Everything finally made sense. The Elder wanted him to consume the Dark Priest's monster core and search through the memories for information regarding the Dark Priests. Elder Bao then left the decision entirely in his hands. Internally, Jean was already pleased. Not only had he found people he could finally speak with comfortably, but he was also being given the very monster core he had missed out on because he passed out after the battle. Jean sighed and said that it seemed he had no choice but to eat the monster core. For the greater good, of course. The moment he consumed it, memories immediately began flowing into his mind. He soon found himself witnessing Enoch's past. In the memory, Enoch desperately begged a female dark priest to choose him. He declared that he was tired of living the miserable life of a failure. More than anything, he wanted true and overwhelming power. The woman simply looked at him. Then she handed him a container filled with a mysterious blue liquid and told him to prove it. The vision ended shortly afterward. Back in the present, Elder Bao and Cindy immediately asked whether Jean was all right. After organizing the memories he had just seen, Jean informed them that he was fine. However, he had also learned something important. He had discovered the Dark Priest's next plan. The Elder fixes Jean with a steady gaze and asks if he is certain. Jean confirms without hesitation. The battle, he explains, was nothing more than a smokescreen. The Dark Priest had a different plan all along. He lays it out plainly. The tradition that has never once been broken after an expedition ends is the Archbishop's banquet. That is exactly where they intend to strike. Their true plan is to raid it and wipe out every high-ranking official gathered inside. The Elder's expression tightens. He points out that security at the banquet is quite substantial. Are the Dark Priests really at that level of military strength? Jean admits he could not see their exact numbers. There was a man wearing an iron mask, and the woman connected to the death of the Golden Bug's sons was present as well. Those two alone, he says, carry considerable combat power. The Elder falls silent for a moment, turning the information over in his mind. Cindy speaks up. In her opinion, this is far too dangerous to handle on their own. She urges them to inform the Order Alliance immediately and cancel the banquet. The Elder shakes his head. That will not do. Reporting this to the Order Alliance would mean revealing that Jean consumes monster cores, and if that comes to light, they might be the ones framed as Dark Priests. Moreover, canceling the banquet solves nothing. The Dark Priests would simply fall back on a backup plan, and everything would return to square one. Jean asks what they should do. The Elder's answer is calm and deliberate. They will use the information Jean has brought them. If they know the rats are coming, all they need to do is set a mousetrap. Sometime later, the banquet hall glows with warmth and candlelight. Jean steps inside wearing a fitted suit, cutting a far different figure than the blood-soaked mercenary the expedition knew. The whispers begin almost immediately. Attendees murmur among themselves. Is that him, the mercenary from the expedition who played such a huge role? He looks so young. He does not look all that strong. Her companion raises an eyebrow and wonders aloud whether she should try talking to him. Before Jean can take another step, a familiar voice calls out from behind him. Roland strides forward with a grin, remarking that if it is not their genius, the star of the day, showing his face only now after everything is over. He laughs and admits he thought Jean had actually died out there. Jean turns and asks with a faint smile whether Roland was worried about him, apologizing for the chaos that kept him away. Roland waves it off with a laugh, saying he understands the battle was no joke. But more importantly, he leans in and asks what is going on. It seems their genius has picked up a tail. He nods subtly toward a figure nearby. That man is an inquisitor, is he not? Jean exhales quietly. That guy, he mutters, is truly working hard at his job. His reason for suspicion is that Jean is too strong. Roland says, those who did not even participate in the expedition have no right to be so gloomy. He offers an apology on behalf of the Order Alliance, then tells Jean not to be too upset. The fact that he fought for so many people does not change. Jean thanks him sincerely. A formal announcement cuts through the hall. The Archbishop has arrived. All eyes turn as Archbishop Conrad steps forward, the room settling into respectful stillness. He addresses the gathering warmly, telling everyone that this banquet exists for them, and that he would be grateful if they simply enjoyed themselves. Jean watches from a measured distance. The atmosphere of the banquet is reaching its peak. That is the signal. He steadies himself quietly. He needs to be ready now, ready to face whatever comes next. Outside the warmth of the hall, darkness moves. A group of dark priests advance through the shadows, drawing closer to the city. The calm does not last. A guard rushes in, voice tight with urgency, informing the Archbishop that there is a problem. Conrad turns with a measured frown and asks what he means. The guard struggles to get the words out. Even as he speaks, a massive swarm of abominations has appeared at the city's north gate. The sound of the impact shakes the hall. In the chaos that ripples through the crowd, Jin's mind returns to the Elder's earlier words. No matter how much of a surprise attack the Dark Priests launch, fighting against all the knights stationed at the banquet would be physically impossible for them. So there's only one move they can make. They will cause a disturbance somewhere in the city to force the troops to scatter, and that opening is what they will use to strike the banquet hall. Back in the present, the Archbishop calls out in a sharp voice, commanding that everything be done to stop the abominations at once. Pull troops from the banquet if necessary. Jin's jaw tightens. Preventing exactly that is the most critical part of the plan. But the Elder had no authority to command the Archbishop's troops. Cindy had stepped in to handle that piece. The plan needed one more move, and before the knights could be swayed by the chaos, the banquet hall needed to go first. The explosion rocks the hall without warning. Attendees cry out in alarm as the ceiling collapses in a burst of dust and debris. Guards shout for the knights to protect the officials. Gene watches and allows himself a single quiet exhale. It worked. The knights did not leave their posts. Outside in the darkness, the dark priests freeze at the sound. One of them asks whether that explosion was part of their plan. The realization lands like ice water. They figured it out. They knew the dark priests were coming. While Gene draws his sword and says it's time to catch the rats. Meanwhile, outside in the darkness, Dark Priest watches the explosion and sensed that something was coming toward them. Yellow Hair asked if there was a traitor among them, but before he could get an answer. One of the priests says flatly that the operation is being halted. They will fall back and plan their next move. The yellow-haired one among them lets out a frustrated shout. He had finally gotten fired up for the first time in ages, and now it ends like this. He declares loudly how annoying it all is. But before any of them can take a step backward, something sharp cuts through the air. The yellow-haired priest catches it just in time, his body going rigid. Then Gene arrives. He looks at the group without a trace of urgency and speaks simply. Easy to get in, but hard to get out. The lady priest narrows her eyes. She recognizes him. He is the one from the incident with the golden bug sons. She demands to know, was it him? Was he the one who leaked their plan? Before tension can fully ignite, a sharp impact lands on one of the priests. The elder steps forward. He says quietly that it has been a while, addressing the man as Vikram. Vikram straightens and stares. Gene turns to the elder and asks whether he knows that man. The elder confirms it. They share a terrible connection. Vikram is a Vertram monk. He is also a former disciple. Vikram lets out a cold laugh. Disciple? He asks if the old man is still living in those pathetic memories, in the past or the present. He says the elder always knows exactly how to make his blood boil. Jin's attention snaps to something he had not expected to see. Vikram is using the mind's eye, the same technique Bao uses. He had not recognized it at first, but now he can feel the mana of the mind's eye radiating clearly from Vikram. The elder glances back at Jin and tells him to handle the other two, then turns and closes the distance toward Vikram, and they start engaging in fierce battle. The yellow-haired priest lights up immediately. This is exactly what he wanted. The lady priest steps forward as well, declaring that they will see just how capable Jin's side really is. And with that, she transforms. Her body shifts into a black panther, powerful and fluid. Jin takes it in, a transformation ability and monstrous strength that swings a mace like a pebble. He acknowledges that he would certainly have been caught off guard if he had faced them unprepared, but is fine now. He has already worked through their abilities using Enoch's memories. There is only one problem remaining. The Heresy Inquisitor still lurking in the background. His thoughts break off as the yellow-haired priest charges forward, Iron Mace swinging with savage force. Jin notes it grimly. He cannot use his monster core abilities in this fight. Not with the Inquisitor watching. It is a real limitation. He raises his sword and deflects the mace cleanly. The yellow-haired priest blinks in disbelief. He actually deflected the mace with his sword? From behind, the Black Panther lunges, her voice cold as she tells him he will not be able to dodge this even if he sees it coming. The blade flashes. She recoils, cut before she could land the blow. Jin steadies himself and lets the feeling of the fight settle through him. It feels just like being trapped in that nightmare 12 years ago, he thinks. A bit of training weight would have been even better. It has been a long time since he has truly felt like fighting. Across the field, Bao and Vikram are locked in their own fierce exchange. Bao watches his former disciple's movements and notes aloud that Vikram still overcommits his body. He has not changed. His stubbornness of always chasing something new over what is proven remains. Vikram fires back without missing a beat. That is not stubbornness. It is called individuality, old man. He speaks steadily. He had wanted to support Vikram's path. A new path is always difficult, but sometimes it creates miracles. The problem, he says, was always Vikram's impatience and his excessive greed. Those things tainted the individuality he once had. Dirty tricks built on lies are bound to collapse eventually. Bao tells him to listen carefully, because what follows will be his final lesson. He begins releasing his mind's eye, the all-seeing eye. Vikram stares. That technique, he says, it is only possible once someone has reached the highest realm. As expected, the old man has the experience to back up everything he says. He has gotten even stronger since they last met. But that, Vikram says slowly, is exactly why the old man is no good. Unlike what he preaches, in this world, a perfect lie becomes the truth. Something begins to stir around Vikram. Power builds in the air as he activates his own technique. The mind's eye, the all-seeing eye. Bao goes rigid. His voice carries something between disbelief and alarm as he demands to know. How can Vikram use that?